I'll call this meeting of the Groundwater Technical Review Committee to order. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with section 19.83 and 19.84 Wisconsin stats in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all members of the committee are present. And now we will move on to election of a chairperson. Do we have a nomination? We don't nominate anybody, we're going to nominate you.
I nominate Jeff Retzloff.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's a landslide.
Yeah, aye. Yes. All right, thank you. Before we jump into our list of agenda items, I just wanted to point out that we're meeting in this formal setting and in this manner because the village attorney has advised that the Groundwater Technical Review Committee needs to meet in this sort of format. We have not met as a committee too many times. In fact, I think I only remember, other than a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago, not having met since 2012. Most of you weren't here for another project. I think it was that far back. But going forward, we'll be meeting in this sort of formal setting. With that, approval of minutes, there are none. Item number 5 on the agenda, unfinished business. We have no unfinished business, which takes us to new business. And we have one new business item. Michael Anderson, agent for Green Hills Contracting, Inc. and Closet Investments, LLC, property owner. Review and recommendation for a conditional use permit application to allow a salt or de-icing material storage facility on property located in a groundwater protection overlay district pursuant to section 17.40.112 sub 3 of the village's zoning code. This is a discussion and action item. What I'd like to say just briefly, what brings us here today, obviously, is the wellhead protection regulations. Michael Anderson and Green Hills Contracting is proposing to start a new business on a property that's located on Clinton Drive in the business park or in the industrial park, which also happens to be in a wellhead protection area or zone, a groundwater protection overlay district, and as such is subject to the regulations. Part of the business operations proposed is a de-icing material storage and distribution business or component of the business. And that specifically is a prohibited use under section 17.40.10 sub J of the groundwater or the wellhead protection regulations. However, there is a provision in the groundwater protection regulations, 17.40 sub 12, that actually provides for prohibited uses being able to operate in a wellhead protection area, provided they meet one of multiple criteria. In this case, the business that's proposed, the de-icing material storage operation, is proposed for a piece of property that heretofore in its history has been known to have a similar prohibited business, a similar landscaping type operation with salt storage. This was confirmed by our fire chief at our previous meeting, and it has been discussed in materials handed out. The current use of the business, current use of the property is a portable toilet operation that also uses chemicals. That use, frankly, does not have, at this point, a legal zoning permit, so we don't know exactly what those chemicals are, other than It was a business that had, in the last month or so, had an issue with an employee. And if need be, we can get into the details of that. But essentially, the business was shut down for a short period of time to provide for cleanup of the chemicals and making some building electrical code improvements to address some safety concerns and issues. So arguably, the most recent use of this property involves a potentially wellhead groundwater contamination type use. So with that in mind, we're here essentially listening to a proposal to replace the current use with a prohibited use, the de-icing material storage use. But hopefully we'll hear how this use is going to improve the situation and result in a less risky contamination situation. So with that said, I'd like our Associate Planner, Jordan Yankee, to briefly introduce the project and explain exactly what the committee is charged with doing today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, committee members. Thank you for coming together in such short order to address this case and review it and ultimately recommend on it. Jeff covered enough from the code and the reasoning of why we're here and what has led up a bit to this case, but I'll give you some brief details about the site and some slides here just to sort of expound on a few things that were in the packet. So as Jeff mentioned, this is an application from Green Hills, Mike Anderson, the owner, and this location is in the industrial park. You can see the address on the screen here off of Clinton Drive. It's actually nestled in between Clinton and Edison. And what you're hearing today is technically considered a conditional use permit that you'll be recommending on. So summary here, again, Michael Anderson, applicant on behalf of Green Hills Industries for a conditional use permit. The technical language surrounding it is a salt or de-icing material storage use for the purpose of distribution within a groundwater protection overlay district, which we've discussed ad nauseum. This is located within. Here's a location here, the boxed white area. There's actually 2 parcels currently. And so part of the zoning process after this would be to combine them to create a one overall site development plan. It's roughly 3 acres, if I'm remembering correctly, after the properties are combined. And as you can see there, it's nestled between 2 streets. Clinton's on the south portion where the entrance is, and that would be the primary ingress egress to the site and where the building currently sits. That being said, it's zoned M1 and the surrounding areas, of course, are industrial uses as well, along with the institutional use, of course, on behalf of the village to the north. Summary here, again, new location for Green Hills, part of the zoning process, sort of separate but also in unison in a way, is horticultural services and snow removal services, which is a conditional use within the M1 district. However, call your attention again to today, we're reviewing the salt or de-icing material storage component as it pertains to the groundwater protection overlay district, and that requiring a conditional use permit. And Jeff had mentioned the code amendments and sort of how we got here in terms of this substituting a pre-existing facility or use that was prohibited. A couple details though, there is a building expansion along with the project that would be reviewed through the sort of, again, the unison site plan conditional use permit for the horticultural services and the CSM that is planned to go forward to the Plan Commission along with your recommendation today about the salt or de-icing material storage. There's parking lot enhancements, landscaping, and yard improvements that you can see on the site plan, and I'll have a couple renderings here. Site plan here is included in the packet, hard to see obviously on the screen, but as you can see, sort of that polygon or the almost a Tetris looking shape with the ingress egress on the bottom part off of Clinton Drive, and then Edison to the north, where the more of the yard would be proposed with the bins that you can see on the site plan. Here's some renderings to give you a bit more of an idea. The top one, that would be the building with the proposed expansion to the building as you enter in off of Clinton. And then from the north, actually Edison, the bottom photo is giving you an idea of how it would appear once implemented the site with a new ingress egress point gated where more so business trucks would come in and out if I'm remembering correctly, and I can let the applicant mention that as well if needed. It was in the packet. I didn't want to spell out everything in slides, but the overarching reason and purpose why we're here is for the Groundwater Committee to provide objective and scientific technical review for this conditional use permit as it pertains to the groundwater stipulations, and make a recommendation to the Plan Commission and ultimately the Village Board. So one thing that was noted, and again, more detail in the packet, the 5 items per code that you would review and consider under the application and quoted in the code section is the site plan, the business plan or narrative, the environmental assessment report, the operational safety plan, and the contingency plan. And those were all included as attachments in full length in the packet and summarized in those order, or in that order, I should say. So with that, that's just kind of giving you an idea, a bit more depiction of the site. For now, I guess we could take questions, or if Mike or Yankee and Yankee had anything to add, or if you guys would like to listen to them, I'll turn it over to the Chairman Retzloff.
Thanks, Jordan. Before we jump into detailed discussion of the documents, I'd like to give Mike and or his support staff an opportunity to provide some information or supplement what we just went over. Unless you just want to respond to questions, it's up to you. Just push the button on the bottom to turn the light off. There you go.
Okay, all right, no problem. Yeah, so we've been working with Mike here for a little bit on this project. As Jordan had said, it's going to be, the plan is to have a landscape company, which is going to be their primary business. However, they do snow and ice removal, and in the wintertime, there will be some de-icing agents on the property for their own use and for dispersal. That's the plan at this point. Mike has covered before in previous meetings, but he can go through that again, that this is, according to the EPA, none of this is anything considered dangerous. And the actual use of the de-icing agent is to be put on roads, parking lots, sidewalks, stuff like that. And everybody uses it. The village themselves use de-icing agents, and the county uses de-icing agents. Everybody is aware of that. So, however, with that, at the direction of the village, we've actually come up with a containment plan that if one of the tanks were to end up with a leak, a major catastrophic leak, that we have a sump contained in the building, which is sized to take a full tank worth of liquid. Outside, there is some dry storage area. The dry storage of the salt, turbo melt, is going to be covered. It's in hoop buildings. Jordan, can you get back up to your site plan? Thank you. This is a floor plan basic location of this area right here. These are the covered hoop structures. If you were to look at it from the side view, this is what they look like. It basically is a 6-foot tall concrete retaining wall with the salt inside of it, with a 12-foot hoop building over the top of it. The one side is open towards the north for loading and unloading the material. The cover, the roof is there obviously to keep as much rain off of it as possible. The area within the structure itself, the concrete, is all pitched to come to a center where there's a drain, and the drain actually will drain to a, what did we say, 2,500 gallon tank, I think it was?
100 gallon holding tank, 108.
So that drain will drain directly down into the tank right below it. Then inside of the drain, there's a pump which will pump the liquid inside the building over here, which will be under roof, and it'll actually be put inside the tanks for for mixing with the rest of the chemical to bring it up to its proper salinity. I couldn't think of the word, sorry. Anyhow, so to bring it up to, the proper mix. So that the rainwater that falls within that area is actually going to be collected. It shouldn't have anything draining out into the environment or the soil or anything like that. According to, I believe it's MMSD, technically, if there was a spill, it could be pumped directly into the sanitary sewer, is my understanding. That's not the plan here. Our plan is to clean it up, pump it back into the tank. Remember, this stuff gets put on the ground. If it ends up with a little bit of dirt in it, it's not going to be, the end of the world, because it gets spread out on pavements, parking lots, sidewalks, stuff like that. So that's the basic use of what we're talking about. One more time, this is only during the cold weather months when de-icing is generally used. At the rest of the year, these bins will be cleaned out, hosed out, pumped out, and then used as bins for landscape materials like topsoil that you don't want it to get rained on, mulch that you don't want it to get wet. So they're used all year long, but their use actually changes very much so. During that time of the year, like right now, the warmer months, there's not even any of the salinity or any of the turbo melt material on the property for any large amount. The company that's in the building now does porta potties, like Jordan said. And in the packet that I sent you guys, we have photos that were taken inside of their facility. You can see it's not a very clean operation, and they do have salt there presently. I've been by there. I don't remember if I put any of the photos that I actually took. I know I did in some of the packet, but there were outside bins sitting out in their parking lot the day that I was actually physically on the property. And, I can see what the people are doing there now is not what you'd want people to be doing. I realize they haven't gotten a zoning, been in a zoning situation, so I don't know how that all applies with the ordinance. I think they haven't exposed themselves to it. You know what I'm saying? Would be my understanding. But what I'm saying is Mike's planned operation will be much cleaner, much safer, and much nicer. Any questions?
Yes, Kevin.
Yeah. Hey, Bob. Thank you for that explanation. You had mentioned a 2,500 gallon storage tank. Is that shown on the plan exhibit?
I think we had it noted. I can't read this because it's being blown up.
Yeah, I'm having the same
It's noted
issue.
here somewhere. I can clarify that for you, Kevin, but that is part of the design. If it's not clear, I will make it absolutely clear with the next revision.
There were also these sheets that were handed out.
I handed out those.
Is it on these sheets? These are also hard to read at the scale it's on?
Here, give you a copy of what was handed out, just the same thing.
Right. I'm wondering if those are the 2,500 gallons of storage.
Just for your reference, I handed out these to show the containment location and the side view. It shows the recess and the
Right.
concrete.
On the second page, we do have the inside containment. You can see where the floor is lowered down and wrapped in concrete. This is the building plans. So this would not appear to be checked with you.
Yeah, Jeff's using his magnifying glass.
Do you need to use that?
Yeah, I would need to use that too.
But it is on the, so in the information that we submitted, it would be the document, that was listed as, salt explanation 1 on there. And it does give the overview, just a brief bullet pointed description, of the dry storage itself, some of the advantages, to it. Basically, it's, with the concrete below, kind of a standard, shows like a standard, salt shelter on there, de-icing shelter on there. Kind of says a minimum of the 3 feet. We have ours listed as 6 feet. And then there is a number 5 on there listed. There's 2,500 gallon holding tank installed underneath the salt pad to collect any potential rainwater runoff. There is that grinder pump inside of there, which will then pump into the tank storage part of the building, which is located right here. Which one of those tanks on that tank plan will be a 6,250 gallon tank in which we can pump that into. So total, we have about 9,000 gallons of capacity to store. So I mean, what that kind of does is there's really only one other municipality or county that I know of that's actually doing that, and that would be Waukesha County themselves.
So is that tank dedicated only for the spill, or can it be, the spilled material be mixed with the existing material?
So basically that tank is a dedicated tank, and that's to increase the capacity of that, essentially that underground tank. Just, and my kind of goal with that was to be as self-sufficient as possible, so we don't have to use any municipal water to make any of our brine, or any of that solution. Now with that, obviously it'll be partially solidified already. And essentially what we would do is we'd bring it up to the 23.3% salinity, when we actually manufacture.
Okay, how will staff know about the spill contingency plan that you have?
How does our staff?
Yeah.
It is so, as in the plan itself, it is listed, on there that we have to post it. So it'll be posted by our labor laws, which will be on the entrance to the warehouse. And then it'll also be posted in the tank room and by, the de-icing shelter itself.
Okay.
So those will be kind of blown up sections of that.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
You plan to have kind of a I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you plan to have a regular kind of review of the contingency operation in case it's needed with staff or?
With, you guys?
No, with your staff.
Our staff?
Yeah.
So we do have we do have regular training that does go on with that. As far as the, so like the dry area or the dry storage, typically what we do with that is we have one person who is in charge of actually loading vehicles. That is Ara on my staff. He's in charge of all our bulk materials. So you have one person who's loading trucks. We don't allow, even currently, we just don't allow any employee to go and load a truck. I mean, partially for safety reasons. That person, Ara is trained on the loader. And it's just kind of the safest thing to, have somebody who's familiar with that loading operation, to be loading in the dry materials. Now, as far as the liquid materials themselves, loading and unloading, I'm currently the only one who does it right now. As far as the big tankers, and then Ara is able to load, the smaller trucks and whatnot. As far as, with the big tanker, I have a CDL, Class A CDL, with tanker endorsements. So I'm the one typically doing that, but we don't, I do have one other guy trained on the liquid loading of tanks, as well, and that would be Josh, and he's one of my lead foremen. So, we don't allow any self-servicing. We don't allow, unfortunately, if, one of us is not there, we can't load up liquid at that point. So,
All right, thank you. John, you had a question?
Are you going to be reusing the equipment that's in that building, or is it all new equipment?
it's all new equipment. I don't believe you've been inside the building, so everything is.
Yeah.
They currently have salt storage, there. They have super sacks, which actually they would qualify for Wisconsin 277 actually in that building. Obviously, they're not abiding by that. But yeah, we have a brand new, and I believe the pictures of our facility are in there, or should be in your, in your packet. It kind of shows like what our brine maker is and just some of our tanks. There would be, those tanks, some of those tanks that we currently have, the three 5,000s will be brought to the new facility. Those tanks are less than a year and a half old. And then the additional tank would be the additional 6,250 would be a brand new tank. And those tanks are exactly what you guys would be using as tanks. I'm assuming that'll probably be the same tanks. There's really only a couple tank manufacturers that are going in your guys' brand new DPW facility.
Paul, do you have a question?
The buried tank, I'm assuming is a poly tank
Are you talking the one under the salt?
under, yeah.
We have that as like a septic style tank. And I believe it was a fiberglass tank, and then I believe you made the recommendation to.
Yeah, I made the recommendation that it be a sealed concrete septic style tank because of the having equipment over the top.
Oh.
Even though the floor out there is gonna be 7 inches and sealed
Mhm.
concrete, still better off not driving over a poly tank if you can.
Okay, I'm not familiar with sanitary tanks, but I'm assuming they're lined or coated in some manner.
Recently did design for a Generac facility. Which that one has got a potential having oil and fuel. Generac is training or is testing outdoor generators. And where it's what they call a life test, where they start it up and let it go until it basically dies.
Got it.
And so in that area, that's all approved by Waukesha County. So, and again, it was a sealed, so it's kind of like an epoxy. coating, but it's technical.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I have a
So
couple of questions.
Can I follow up on Paul's question with that specifically for the tank? How long would you anticipate the volume of any contained spill material to be in that tank prior to it getting pumped out from the sump pump into that indoor storage tank?
Say, what we generally do is put a high water alarm, look for a lift station. The tank gets to a level with a safety area above it, at that point it. In general, I would think you'd have water sitting in, I mean, just because we get a little bit of rain, snow melt. I think it would, and the tank.
So you would reference the Waukesha example. Was there like a leakage test performed prior to it being accepted to verify that the containment of the material that's of concern, that it wouldn't leak out of that storage, underground storage area?
Done. What we did, I did send a cut sheet of the material, coating material to Generac, to the architect. Generac's engineers themselves looked at it, as well as Waukesha County. The material that was, to be coated with it.
So is the material that's proposed that could potentially be introduced against the liner material, is there corrosivity that could impact that liner?
My recollection. If there was.
Thank you. Couple questions. Bob, are you a licensed environmental engineer?
I do environmental stuff. I've worked with the Illinois EPA, the federal EPA. Yeah, so there is no specific environmental professional licensing as far as that goes, specific. But yes, I'm very familiar and have worked with many environmental things. I worked with one lost site that accidentally got opened up in Illinois. EPA that had to be closed back, tagged up and sealed.
Okay, thank you. When did you get involved in this process? When did you get involved in this application process?
We heard you guys, so I had a meeting with you, if I recall, it was either June 3rd or June 7th, and then we were told everything we needed, and I think I heard you guys pretty shortly after that, within a week.
Frame was all pretty tight. So that's about my recollection.
In June?
Yeah.
Okay. In the transition between the winter and the summer seasonal stuff, do you expect that the granular area will be completely cleaned out of material, so then you're ready to bring in whatever landscaping stuff will be stored there? Or is there going to be some small pile of leftover that you need to put somewhere else? And if so, where is that somewhere else?
So typically what ends up happening is, so we're usually pretty good about timing. We don't, part of my core business model, just in general, and I did explain that to you, is kind of, our buffer yard or whatnot, is we we don't store massive amounts of anything, you know, and that's part of our whole thing is we don't want to, you know, essentially it helps with our overhead costs. And because we do, you know, some of our, you know, we do our own logistics, our turnaround time is extremely quick. So we don't typically have a lot of de-icing product left at the end of the season. But typically what we will do, before those bins get, you know, cleaned out is any leftover product we will put into what we call super sacks or bulk bags. Then those get bagged and wrapped, and then they would be stored inside of the warehouse with whatever little bits left. For example, this past year we had 11 bags, so about 11 tons of material left. Otherwise, we do work with some other vendors that typically will buy any excess product that we have left at the end of the year, because it is kind of crucial for our operation to for summer to get those cleaned out to use them for our compost and topsoil.
So they'll be bagged up and sealed and or stored in a indoor facility, so there's not any chance of.
Yeah.
Yes.
It'd be, you know, just like you guys buy a pallet of salt and throw it inside, you know, somewhere, you know, inside fire department or wherever. I'm sure you guys do stuff like that regularly. So I mean, obviously that stuff isn't going to get wet or anything like that. So,
Okay.
and if it is plastic wrapped and everything. So.
Follow-up question on the material. Do your staff use personal protective equipment when they're handling the material? The reason I ask is when I look in the safety data sheets, it indicates that it can be irritating to skin and eyes. And if it's ingested, it could also irritate the stomach. So that's where I was wondering if PPE is used typically.
Yeah, so typically, like, let's say we're loading a truck, probably, I'm sure you're familiar with the DPW. I mean, you guys don't, you know, inside of your wheel loader, I'm sure you guys don't put on safety glasses and gloves. I mean, you're kind of protected in the piece of equipment with that for loading the granular. If we're loading, you know, like, let's say a bag material or pallet material, again, that is all plastic wrapped and it is sealed, so we're not actually physically touching the product. But in the case of liquids, we do wear safety glasses and gloves, just to prevent any, you know, just any exposure or anything like that. And I mean, part of it is too, is, you know, if I did touch a little bit, I don't want it on my pants or anything like that either.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just looking at this in the lens of the wellhead protection area, you know, identifying that, you know, the personal protective equipment makes sense, having spill containment makes sense. In those safety data sheets, it also has two categories, one for the granular and one for the liquid. In the granular material, it lists that it's not CERCLA, subject to CERCLA release reporting. However, in the liquid portion, that section 15 is missing. So if that's not available now, would you be able to follow up with that additional information?
Yes, I saw the liquid. I did see something on that listed. I have a response to the questions you sent over right around about, I think you sent to Bob about an hour ago. Listed on 5 of the SDS. Try to pull it up myself here.
All right, before we get too down a rabbit hole, you indicated, Kevin, you had some questions that you sent out to them to respond to
Yeah, there's a
Yes,
set of
you
questions.
for today? Or is it including stormwater stuff that may be more appropriate for the site plan?
No, it was related. It was related to the groundwater protection.
So do you want to go over that list?
Well, yeah, that was one of them
Okay.
on my list, and a couple of them were addressed already.
I did just get this, like, you know, less than 10 o'clock, I think.
I just prepared it this morning. Yep, these were questions that I was anticipating asking today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I tried to, I was running a couple minutes late. I just tried to quickly
Got a copy.
answer everything on there because I wasn't sure if we needed them right away for it.
Why don't we, since you went to the effort of doing this,
What-
why don't we go ahead and you go through your list?
Okay,
Try and keep the answers short and to the point. I know we got some time constraints. Paul, I think when do you have to leave?
I'll
Okay, all right.
Okay, yeah, so you had already addressed the posting of the de-icing plan. And then we were just talking about question number 6. So with respect to ingestion, and so if it was ingested, it would irritate the skin, and I'm wondering what would happen if this material, and granted, there's spill containment that's planned. You know, if this material were ingested coming from the groundwater, you know, what would happen? Is it fair to assume that material would be diluted?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be very fair to say that that material would be diluted. I mean, you know, so essentially it's like this material is being spread on parking lots, it's being spread on roadways, it's being spread on sidewalks. And I mean, there is no regulated amount on there. So I mean, you could literally take an acre parking lot and put 6,000 gallons of product on that if you wanted. And there, you know, essentially there's no, you know, and I mean, there is a lot if you drive around in winter, and this is related to other de-icing products as well. You'll see parking lots that are just pure white that look like, you know, I mean, they look like salt flats, including in this industrial park.
So the CERCLA reporting requirement, is listed for number 15 for the granular, but it's not listed for the liquid. Can you clarify why it's not listed for the liquid, but it's listed for the granular?
One second here, let me pull up the granular one. Sorry, I gotta reconnect to my hotspot. It is on 15. Both of them say, we're not subject to that reporting.
Okay, could you transmit that additional sheet then? It wasn't in the packet that I had.
Yeah, it is. I know it was sent on over, but I'll resend it on over to everybody.
Thank you.
And it'll be page 4 or 5.
Yeah, the safety data sheet pages weren't numbered as well. So you answered information about the sump pump and how it's not directly connected to the sanitary system. So that addresses question number 4. And back on your de-icing plan, you referenced a reasonable exposure to reasonable amounts of this product are not harmful. However, in the safety data sheets, it says it can irritate. So is there, you know, a threshold that you have identified on what's allowable for exposure?
What I can do is I can talk to the actual manufacturer and just get what those thresholds actually are.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you. It indicates there was the minnow test under the ecological information of 1 gram per liter. So I'm wondering how that compares to maybe other materials that are on site or in the industrial park, but maybe that's not under your purview to answer that.
Because we happen to have that 834-page environmental report done. I just literally went through it, grabbed an address right over on Edison Drive. It's within less than a quarter mile. And I did list just some common stuff that they have. I just picked 2. I picked the lead and the chromium that are stored at that facility at W19025 Edison Drive. And I just kind of put the fish toxicology thing on there for that particular product that they have. And then theirs are in micrograms. So ours are all listed in grams. So microgram is 1 millionth of a gram. So that is far more toxic than what we have.
1,000.
And then I also put just the lead and kind of the same thing. And it's in milligrams. So that'd be 1/1000th of a gram. So those are just a couple examples of a product stored nearby. And I know we can provide more. I was not able to just get the name off of the current facilities use of, like, I know they have some other chemicals and stuff like that, but I mean, they do store de-icing products there currently. So, I mean, it would be somewhat in the same ballpark of what they're currently storing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mike, for answering the question thoroughly. And you've answered my other questions too. We had talked about whether or not the material gets pumped back into a tank or if it's combined with the existing material. So that has all of my questions that I had on the document have been addressed.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any general questions before we go on? There were 5 documents that were submitted cumulatively, collectively.
Having been inside this building and known the condition of the building, have all the contaminants that were there prior been cleaned up? And if not, are they compatible with the de-icing product that you're putting in there? In other words, will they cause a reaction of any type?
Because I mean, a bunch of the stuff that they are storing is currently de-icing. From what I understand, I'm not sure the exact chemical that was spilled on it. You guys would honestly probably know better than I would. But I have since been in that building and there are no, they have cleaned up whatever chemical they spilled. The de-icing stuff that they currently have on site would not negatively impact anything that we have. Furthermore, the current existing building, everything will be kind of cleaned up. It's not used really. So the tank room is in the addition of the building or in the upgraded facilities of our building.
All right.
So that the tanks can be put over the top of the containment area.
Let me go through the document. Jordan, can you bring up that slide that has the documents? The first one was a site plan map with all building and structure, footprints, driveways, sidewalks, parking lot, stormwater structures, groundwater monitoring wells, and 2-foot ground elevations. Does anybody have any specific questions or any comments about the site plans that were provided, other than what we've already discussed? In summary, do we need them to revise the plans in any way? You want something more to be shown about the 2,500 gallon tank?
The details of the tank, I think, would be beneficial to have that documented, and so we understand how it's going to work.
And Bob, I assume that whole system would require a plumbing permit of some sort?
Yeah, I would imagine so. We would be issued or applying for it anyhow.
Actually, so from what I did actually reach out to the state, because I know there was mention in Jordan's more recent email about us needing that Department of Professional Services plan review. And in talking to them, they do not count the fixtures, so like our tanks and everything like that, because they are not connected to your municipal water supply, do not count as an added fixture. So to actually have that review done requires 16 added fixtures. And it does not include, like, if let's say we have a bathroom that we're remodeling, if we replace a faucet, that's not considered an added fixture. What's added fixtures are sinks, mop basins, floor drains, the catch basins for the stormwater management. So we have that, just the one there, would be considered an added fixture. So, and this is what I got from them. So we should have a total of, I believe it's 11, new fixtures that we're adding on there. So it would not require, the tanks themselves and anything that we're using are considered, they consider it as a piece of machinery. So like, let's say you were to bring in, like I'm going to use your DPW as an example again. You guys have a brand new Hendricks.
All right, thanks, Mike. I think we're going a little straying off here. As far as the plumbing permit, we'll check with the Safe Build staff, since I think they reviewed the plans, and we'll just double check. If you need a plumbing permit, we'll get a plumbing permit.
Could I just ask a follow-up question on that? Are there any control valves on the sump pump where you're discharging the line?
We're discharging, we're not discharging. Are you
Discharging into the tank.
from the dry?
In the case you needed to swap out the tank, that you could isolate so it's not discharging without a tank being on the other end.
Yeah, everything in our, it's in the narrative too. It does indicate that we have valves, the ball valves, banjo valves, style valves on every single.
Okay, so that's subject to plumbing permit review.
Okay. Moving on, document number 2, the business plan and or other documentation which describes in detail the use, activities, and structures proposed. Does everyone have a good sense of what's proposed with respect to the wellhead protection regulations, the liquid storage, the granular storage, the pump connection between the two? We'll talk about containment in just a bit, but as far as just the description of the operation, is everyone okay with detail provided? Okay. Environmental assessment report prepared by a licensed environmental engineer, which details the risk to and potential impact of the proposed use, activities, and structures on groundwater quality. In the event of a substitution or relocation of a pre-existing use, which applies in this case, the report shall address the ways that the substituted or relocated use will reduce the risk to groundwater compared to the pre-existing use. So we do have a formal environmental impact assessment report that was included in the documentation. Bob, you prepared that. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that? I do, and also I'll just jump in and you guys can respond. I'm not going to wade into the weeds on this, but there's some statements made in the first paragraph that are not quite exactly correct, but that's neither here nor there at this point. The description about the previous use, the landscaping company, you refer to it. My question to you is, did you at all feel the need to reach out to that company, Naturescape, and ask them what they did or how much they had on the site in order to do a comparative evaluation of your use versus the previous one?
Did not, because I'm not sure that would they still have the same people available, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, that's,
I did not.
Okay.
I agree. I did not, because I didn't think it was likely that I'd get any kind of real general answers from.
okay. Yeah, because frankly, I mean, we have, all I know is that the fire chief, not that I wouldn't believe the fire chief, but has said, yes, this is what used to be there. It would have been a little bit nicer to have more solid information about what they did. And also with regard to the toilet facility. The portable toilet facility. I mean, you allude to what they currently do, but I don't know that you provided a lot of detail about the actual chemicals and things that they're using and how that compares to, you know, the salt and that. So, John.
So the chemical that they use in that facility is called J&J Destroyer. It is I did have the MSD or the SDS sheet back in May when that incident happened.
Okay.
But it is a formaldehyde-based chemical that is extremely corrosive and flammable and harmful to the touch.
Okay, so is that something you have access to?
I
that
can
maybe
call them
we
back
can-
and get that.
Bob can supplement his report and,
And I do have in the report, I did show a photo of the with as much as I could get.
yeah, the photos are good, but a little more of an explanation. I mean, ultimately, what you're charged with doing is providing a comparative evaluation of what you're proposing versus what's there today and a conclusion that, you know, that leads one to scientifically, hopefully, to believe that what you're proposing is a lot less riskier than the previous operation. I mean, the report concludes, in short, if I were to own a property next door to Green Hills proposed facility, I would strongly prefer, I think it means Green Hills, to the current occupants. And my question was, well, why? Because you didn't really detail that.
If I could just add a little bit, so Naturescape is, and again, I have it in my environmental, which I can get you the exact pages on that. Naturescape is shown as a previous owner, so I have all the owners going back to when the building was originally built on our file. And I believe, I guess what you did on the narrative was more or so because it is currently being used as a de-icing facility. As we can kind of see in the pictures on that, they have well over 1,000 pounds of salt. on there, which is subject to Wisconsin 270 or 77 trans regulation. I believe you more so focused on the de-icing part of the current application, but I mean, we should be able to add, with the safety data sheets pretty easily, I think, on there. And then, if you want, I know we can provide the exact, years in which, Naturescape did occupy and own that building. Naturescape is one of my customers, actually, so, I can reach out to the, president.
All right, thank you. And also in the last page, second page of your assessment report, the last paragraph, you detail to minimize the possibility of salt getting into the soil and groundwater. The area is mostly paved, which will effectively cap off the soil, greatly reducing water infiltration into the soil. Please refer to the salt spill contingency plan, including documents what is be done in event of a spill by Green Hills personnel. With these operations in place and well documented as well as displayed on site, also general housekeeping as seen in Appendix B, photos and quick and efficient cleanup. A little bit more elaboration about the liquid storage containment. I mean, yes, there's a spill containment plan separate, but explaining that in this comparative analysis, I think would be beneficial as well.
I can add to a little bit on the liquid containment, and the whole reason why we have a sump in there and that little bit of floor pitch is just to quickly get any and all product to essentially the lowest point in which we can put that pump in and pump into either our tanker or another storage tank on there. So I don't believe that was added on there, but there's something that you can add into that.
My last comment about the assessment report is on the last page, the last paragraph. Finally, a groundwater monitoring plan will be in place. 3 shallow test wells are to be installed near the salt storage facilities. These are to be 2-inch point wells installed 10 feet apart or 10 feet deep with a screwed in sealed top to prevent the wells themselves from becoming a source of contamination. The wells are to be opened and a sample of groundwater extracted for sent off to a lab for salt content testing every spring, and so on. Is that enough? Is that adequate? The location of those aren't shown, they're described generally, but maybe showing those on the site plan would be helpful if you know exactly where they're going to go. I just don't know if that is a recommended practice, and is it enough? And does anybody up here have a sense of what's proposed being adequate or overkill or?
I'm aware of multiple other sites. These are mainly in Illinois that I've used where we have done test sampling, with the wells. What happens in general, you want to have them spread out in a reasonable sample. So what I'm figuring for these, two of them nearby the salt storage and then one closer off to the building is what I'm envisioning. I have not added them to the site plan yet, but and again, like I said, the sealed top is critical, absolutely critical, so you can seal it so surface water doesn't drain into the well and get down into the ground.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if you propose something different, I have no problem. We could test. I figured spring was the best time to test them because that's the end of the use of the facility for that, but the use per year.
Right.
Does that make sense? So I mean, that was the reason I said, spring.
To the extent that I'm knowledgeable of that stuff, it makes sense to me. I mean, we're relying on you as a, quote unquote, the licensed environmental engineer to provide a recommendation. And I don't have the expertise to say, oh yeah, what you're proposing makes perfect sense and it's adequate. Kevin, you had a question?
And what I told Mike is that, for the facility, before he does any salt, we definitely want background testing. You know what I'm saying? Before he moves in the icing material there.
Sure.
You gotta do something to start with.
That makes sense. Have a baseline.
Is there an exhibit of where the wells would be located for the testing?
He's gonna add them to the site plan.
I'll show you the site.
Okay. Okay, so if the wells would be tested, it seems like if there's a spill, then following the spill, it would make sense to test it following a spill. In the de-icing document, the contingency plan, even though we're talking about the environmental safety report, maybe it's more on operations. It talks about mopping it up. or using the tank. So, at what point, is it once a year is enough, or when there's a spill, then following a spill, that seems to make sense to have additional well monitoring.
I have no problem with that. We can add that right to the plan, and that's what you guys would like, and that sounds reasonable to me.
Any other comments? All right. Moving on, the fourth document was the Operation Safety Plan, which details the operational procedures for material processes and containment, best management practices, stormwater runoff management, and groundwater monitoring. Any questions about that document that was provided? Any deficiencies or comments, anything that, okay. And the last document, contingency plan, which addresses in detail the actions that will be taken should a containment event caused by the proposed use, activities, or structures occur. I'm gonna just jump in here real quick because I have one question about it. On the first page under containment, it reads, all the liquid storage tanks are surrounded by a sealed concrete lowered floor containment system. This area is sized to contain the full contents of one full tank and keep the de-icer from escaping the building by overland flow or seepage. When I read that, that's why I wanted to see the plan and got these sheets to hand out. So those are out for distribution. My question is, how many tanks are you going to actually have there? You've got a containment area for one tank, but how many tanks are you having total?
We have planned to have 4 tanks there.
Okay, and is the size, I didn't even notice, is the size written on the,
The size should be written on there of the biggest tank. We will have some 5,000s and some 6250s. Now, in that meeting that we had over there in conference room A, that was one of the things that we discussed on there is, and actually I believe my meeting back in June, I did discuss with you the total gallons, maximum gallons that we would be holding on site. And then,
but is it documented in your submittal? I don't want to have to refer back to meeting notes from June or whenever we met.
we can add that into the containment plan on there. I know it is referenced, between some of the SALT documents, on there, and I believe.
In that same respect with the tanks, how often are the tanks required to be replaced to prevent, degradation and, the wall thickness or something like that where it could lead to a failure?
There is no, and even for Mace Rotomold, there is not an actual, service life listed on the tank. Now, what they kind of go off of, or what at least we would go off of is, I mean, typically like the worst thing for plastics or anything like that is UV. We have none of that there, in that facility. The tanks are 1.7 to 1.9 gravity, which means essentially the pounds per gallon that they can hold. And I can just send a follow-up with that just so you guys understand what that is. I mean, these tanks are way over essentially, way over designed for what the actual liquid that we're containing. So it'd be, be able to hold a much heavier and much thicker liquid too. So I mean, that,
Sure. That,
provides extra store,
Yep.
safety really on it.
yeah. Thank you again, Mike, for your thoroughness. I think to Jeff's point, there's enough volume for the storage of one tank failing, but not enough for multiple tanks failing. So that's why just verifying
Yeah, and
that
is something
replacement cycle
that we did.
is why I was asking.
Fuel facilities in the past, it's in general, like I said, the EPA generally requires a containment of one. That's an industry standard.
I would expect the service life to be well, in that 20 to 30 year range. And I mean, if we want to put something together here that, with you guys that say, hey, we're going to replace our tanks every 20 years, I'm completely fine with putting that together as well.
Thank you.
A quick question. In the last pages of your, or Appendix B of your impact assessment report, there's photographs of Green Hills Contracting existing facilities. And one of those, or a couple of those, show tanks, which I assume are going to be the same sort of tanks you have inside? With
Same exact style, yes.
the sort of manifold with the valves and things in the front?
Yes. And again, that's a facility that we rent. So, I mean, we put that facility together. I mean, obviously, it's not a permanent facility, but I mean, if you kind of take a look at some of those pictures and then take a picture or take a look at the pictures of like what's currently being there, I mean, you can just see right off the bat that we run a, you know, I mean, all of our piping's much nicer, everything is just a much nicer looking, you know, storage containment facility overall.
And a huge part of that point was that what they do now is much more well thought out, much more organized, much more kept up than what's in the building presently.
Okay, moving on. In addition to the things we discussed up till now, where we pointed out some potential or some deficiencies, if you will, in what the documentation, you're going to address those and provide that supplemental stuff. For our purposes, as Jordan pointed out and listed in the code, the committee is charged with providing objective and scientific technical review of requests for conditional use permits and make recommendations to the Plan Commission and ultimately to the village board to grant or deny conditional use permits based upon the facts discovered in that review. Also to make recommendations on any and all conditions placed on a conditional use permit. So with that in mind, I'd like to quickly jump to that so we can wrap up here. In addition to the information that was required, the code sections that apply indicate that all conditional use permits granted shall be subject to conditions that will include environmental and safety monitoring determined necessary to afford adequate protection of the public water supply. These conditions shall include all of the following. Provide current copies of all federal, state, local facility operation approval or certificates and ongoing environmental monitoring results to the village. That'll be a standard condition in there.
Yep.
Another one, establish environmental or safety structures monitoring to include an operational safety plan, which you've done, material processes and containment, which you've done, operation monitoring, best management practices, stormwater management, and groundwater monitoring. So us requiring you to comply with your own plans for spill protection and containment on an ongoing basis will be a condition of approval. Replace equipment or expand in a manner that improves the environmental and safety technologies in existence. Do we see the need to require something above and beyond what they're proposing as part of their operation and protection? If so, that's something we could require. For example, if we thought 3 monitoring wells are not enough, we want you to put in, 4, then we would have to, require that as a condition of approval and have a basis for doing this.
How many monitoring wells are proposed? 3.
Okay. So do we need to dictate where they should be, or just leave that up to Bob to come up with?
Engineering wise, I can show you where I'm posted.
Yeah, you're gonna prepare a plan and transmit that.
I'm proposing would be one on this side, one on this side, and one down here.
Would you need an easement to put the well in? Is it on the property or outside of the property?
Absolutely on.
Okay,
So that one, because of that being a swale in that way, you get the stormwater to the detention basin.
got it. Thank you.
Proposing it basically right up next to the concrete here. So it's not in the bottom of the swale. Because I don't want the wellhead itself to become a problem.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
A source of contamination.
Understood, Bob. Jeff, I'm ready to make a recommendation, contingent on the tank details and the well monitoring.
Okay, can you hold on just a second?
I have a couple things to add to when you get a chance.
The last condition, prepare, file, and maintain current contingency plan, which details the response to any emergency which occurs. That'll be kept on site and the village will have a copy. And then finally, the Germantown Village Board shall decide upon a request for a conditional use permit only after full consideration of the recommendation made by the Germantown Groundwater Technical Review Committee. Any conditions above and beyond those specified in subsection 5, which I just read through, are recommended by the Germantown Groundwater Technical Review Committee. So anything above that that we feel is necessary, we need to come up with and make as part of our recommendation. I've kept a list of some things that I thought of as we were going along, so I have some items as well. So are we ready to make a motion?
Do we need to read those items into the minutes? So that's part of the motion for the recommendation?
Yeah, I could read through mine.
Okay.
One was attain plumbing permits as necessary for the spill containment facility. Second, it's maybe more of a question than a requirement. Is the 2,500 gallon tank to be sealed and contained within a septic tank? So it's going to be a plastic liner of some sort, plastic tank inside of a concrete septic system.
Great septic tank.
Yeah.
And those tanks are used for many other things, not just septic, but.
You said epoxy?
Epoxy. It'd be epoxy coated.
Note that it'll be epoxy coated on the inside surface.
Okay.
Top, bottom, everywhere.
And the monitoring wells will be around that. Okay. Third, any leftover material, granular material to be bagged and stored indoors when moved, in the transition period between moving landscaping materials in. We talked about, you were going to do that. The monitoring wells, 2 to 3 is adequate, so I don't need my condition here. And then I had one following up on what John was saying, require that any prior contaminants from the previous use shall be cleaned up to avoid any chemical reaction stuff. Is that necessary to have a condition for that, or are you satisfied with that? Okay. So then I just have those 3 that I would recommend we include in the along with the recommendation for whatever we do, if it's for approval. If someone else on the committee were to make a recommendation or a motion to approve or recommend approval of the conditional use permit with the standard conditions required in the code, plus the 3 that Jeff just read, I'd be okay with that.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, anything else that you want to see added at this point as a condition of approval? Other than you're going to go, and it goes without saying, you're going to go ahead and provide that additional material and supplement the application. So when it goes on to the plan commission, the board, they'll have all of that.
Discussion.
Yeah, oh, okay.
I know.
Okay.
I do have a couple things to add too, just so you guys know too. Wisconsin Trans 277 code. So just in addition to that you talked about, a requirement of having the federal, local, whatever, all the permits. So they do their inspection. So we cannot actually apply for that permit until the facility is built. And essentially they send out, when I'm talking to Jason Jillings over from the county is the one who actually does inspection. They require the facility to see the facility first.
Sure,
So
that makes sense.
they-
And the requirement that you provide us copies of those permits is, subject to whenever you get them. So
Okay, yeah.
understood.
Yeah, so they won't actually allow us to do anything until we're approved by them. So, and they monitor yearly when we renew our permit yearly.
All right, excellent. So we have a motion to recommend approval of the conditional use permit with the 3 conditions that the chairman read through, as well as the standard requirements in the regulations. That makes sense. Sure. Read what you got.
CUP with standard conditions and the code, along with 3 additional conditions.
Okay.
Good. Specification?
We're all good? All right, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unopposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, so the Groundwater Technical Review Committee has made a recommendation that will go on to the Plan Commission and the Village Board. thank you for coming today and providing all the additional information. We really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate all your time. Yeah, we probably need a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. All right, the meeting adjourned at 12:20.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, at least so. Oh, is that why?
Anybody else? Versus the traditional, where it shows her low pressure and that's just. Oh, it is. So. That's just me.
Yeah. Take a picture of it's just so. Correctly.
Sure, if you can read them. It wouldn't hurt if we had some things. So, okay. Yeah, maybe if you just like send an email to us and attach whatever you think is appropriate, and then we'll just make it part of the digital packet that goes to the plan commission and the board, and we can make a reference to it in the staff report. I just.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, right. Just, yeah. Same scenario. You should. Actually. You're right, in theory. Yeah, at this point. Yeah. It's basically like conditional. Like when we start. So the DNR stuff, it's really fun about that still. So, that to apply for the DNR permit, but it didn't know in there that you guys wanted it before. DNR typically takes 14 to 20 days to review that. So what we did is we can provide you guys with all the information we submitted and are submitting to them. And then obviously they won't let us, we won't obtain the permit till, start. Yeah, I mean, here's the still. Clear that, make sure, on this or. If some of that stuff, I'm not against, but I mean, it's more like